Okay, Mayor?
You're good?
We're good.
Okay. Welcome to the October 10th, 2022 regularly scheduled work session. Tonight, there are two items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card. And if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public comment cards can be accepted. Before we begin, I would like to change the order of the reports and presentations. I would like 2B to be presented first, and then we'll proceed to 2A. And I would also like to add an executive session. With that said, we'll go on to Mr. Krokoff.
Let me announce that,
Sure.
Mayor, that
Sorry.
item B is discussion of Chapter 4 as it relates to alcoholic beverages. Our city manager, Mr. Stephen Krokoff.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm before you again tonight to report back on our continued progress in revising Milton's alcohol code. We'd like to thank you for your feedback during September's work session and then following on the October 3rd council meeting. Our legal counsel continues to review the revisions, and we are on track for an October 17th vote. Tonight's presentation will focus on a few remaining revisions for which we need council feedback. The objectives for tonight's presentation include finalizing the hours for craft beer and/or wine markets, discuss an issue with special or catered event alcohol permits and solicit feedback on proposed solutions, discuss two areas that need some tightening up, and introduce the new structure to Chapter 4, and then say goodbye to a few unused sections. As always, these are the icons I'll be using. All right.
Do you want to wait a second? We're seeing you, not the presentation right now.
I'm sorry.
We're
Oh,
not
the
going to see the
presentation.
presentation yet. There you are.
All right, we'll move into craft beer and wine markets. So a craft beer and/or wine market is a retail establishment whose primary purpose is the sale of craft beer and/or wine by the package for off-premise consumption in conjunction with the sale of prepared food and/or groceries. Additionally, it may serve craft beer and/or wine on-premise by the drink. And finally, it will only become available pursuant to a council-approved use permit. Craft beer and/or wine market hours. A craft beer and/or wine market has three distinct retail operations going on within the establishment, each having their own set of hours. The retail selling of prepared foods and groceries is not regulated under Chapter 4. They can sell those items at the same hours as other similar markets are allowed. Next, a craft beer and/or wine market is a malt beverage or wine package store, and the hours are governed by that section in Chapter 4. In Milton, those hours are Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. until midnight, and on Sundays from 11 a.m. until midnight with a package Sunday sales license. And you'll notice next to the Sunday in the icon, I have the letter P. We have not used that before because there is a difference between a package Sunday sales license and an on-premise Sunday sales license. So a craft beer and/or wine market can sell craft beer and wine by the package during those hours. And finally, a craft beer and/or wine market is a retail establishment that permits limited on-premise consumption of craft beer and/or wine. Currently, those hours are limited to Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m. However, council has given some feedback about potentially extending the consumption on premises to Sunday for qualifying establishments. To sell alcoholic beverages by the drink for consumption on premises in Milton, an establishment must derive a minimum of 50% of its total annual gross sales from the sale of prepared meals or food. That was pursuant to the referendum that we did in 2018. As a reminder, prepared food or meals means food that is sold in a heated state by the seller, or food with two or more ingredients mixed or combined by the seller for sale as a single item, or food sold with eating utensils provided by the seller, including plates, knives, forks, spoons, glasses, cups, napkins, or straws. Finally, other than farm wineries, a Sunday sales license must be applied for and approved by the City Council, which brings us to our decision point. If a craft beer and/or wine market derives at least 50% of its total annual gross sales from the sale of prepared meals or food, and it appears that at least one or both of our current craft beer and/or wine markets may do so, should it be allowed to apply for a Sunday sales license for on-premises consumption? We only have two. Both of our current craft beer and/or wine markets have Sunday sales for off-premise consumption, by the package for off-premise consumption. I turn that over to you,
say
to
yes
you
or
all
no?
for,
Okay.
for discussion.
Well, I say yes on this.
Isn't it a restaurant at that point?
I say yes.
Yeah.
All right, easy.
It's very easy. Move on.
I know you're going easiest to probably hardest, my guess, so.
In my head, I'm going easiest
Okay.
to hardest, maybe
Okay.
not in yours.
All right.
And you'll probably see that soon.
It was all pretty difficult.
This brings us to the smaller events with alcohol, and this does get a little confusing. Currently, we have events that do not meet the threshold of a special event, but would still like to serve alcohol. And these are designated as catered events. And before I go further, to the layperson, a catered event immediately brings to mind food. For the purposes of Chapter 4, if you hear catered event, it's about catering alcohol. I'll try to use alcohol, but if you hear me just say catered event, don't worry about the food aspect of it. We're just talking about alcohol.
And what size, number of people? You know, what's the threshold? What are we talking about?
Or a special event permit.
Yeah, that you're talking about here.
So the issue we're talking about are events that do not meet that threshold. And generally that threshold, it's a number of different factors. It's going to be the number of people, the impact on the community, the impact on city services. Those are generally the thresholds in which we use to determine whether or not an event needs a special event permit. What we're talking about tonight are events that do not meet that threshold, so therefore they are not special events.
I know, but I don't know what the threshold is. So what does not meet the threshold?
An event that would not impact city services or the surrounding community.
Or what's the total number of people?
There is not a solid number on that. The minimum threshold is 100, but it's a 2 or 3 prong test
Okay.
depending on where it is.
All right, it's not hard and fast. Got it.
It is not.
Pardon me.
Currently, only alcohol beverage caterers are permitted to serve at these smaller events. And that presents a problem for charities and fundraisers that want to incorporate alcohol, but do not meet the threshold of a special event. The slide before you shows the current regulations for alcohol beverage caterers on the left, and what the corresponding regulations would be for a nonprofit if permitted on the right. So going from the chart in front of you, the alcohol beverage caterers, when they do an event, they do it with their own staff. It's something that you're used to seeing at any catered event. But again, this would include alcohol. A nonprofit, they use volunteers. And if you've ever been to an event that is run by a not-for-profit, very often they get alcohol donated by distributors and wholesalers, and they in turn use that to derive revenue to be able to support the charitable cause. An alcohol beverage caterer must notify the state if they're having an authorized catered event away from their location. A nonprofit must apply to the state for a temporary alcohol permit, and that comes in just a moment. An alcohol beverage caterer must have local alcoholic beverage caterer's license. A nonprofit needs no local license. They both must have city-approved permits for each event. An alcohol beverage caterer has no limit to the number of events it can do by either by number of it for its establishment or by location. And currently, nonprofits are not authorized by code to conduct an event with alcohol at one of these smaller events. just quickly to, I want to make sure I'm not repeating myself. Current code does not limit catered events in any manner, and that too is an issue. An establishment that currently is limited in the type of alcohol that it may serve, or even some establishments that may not even be authorized to serve alcohol, may hire an alcohol beverage caterer to serve alcohol on a fairly regular basis within their establishment, so long as it doesn't offend zoning regulations. In theory, a pet food store could hire an alcohol beverage caterer to provide distilled spirits every Friday night as part of a promotion. That's the code as it currently stands. So if council would like to limit the number of catered events per location, which staff is recommending, staff is recommending excluding outdoor auditoriums and special event facilities from this limitation. Those locations are inherently designed for these kinds of events throughout the year, and these smaller events have little impact on the community or on city resources. Again, this is limited, and we're going to do a spoiler alert. We're going to do the catered alcohol events next for nonprofits. We're going to separate that out, but under a similar structure. But this is specific to the alcohol beverage caterers. And the current issue, I want to make sure that I made it very clear, is that there is no limitation. Like the example I used for the pet food store, that could turn into a Friday night thing. So staff is recommending we set some limitations, such as 5. That's just a number I'm throwing out there. It doesn't mean that that's the number that you should coalesce around. But something along those lines to prevent an alcohol establishment from cropping up where we wouldn't expect one.
So you're saying limit the number of events, like per calendar year?
Our recommendation is limited based on location. So an alcohol beverage caterer, obviously, part of their business model is to be able to do this, and they should be able to do it citywide and even outside the city. So we wouldn't want to limit the number that they could individually do, but by location. So if the pet store, just using that same example, and I'm trying to use a ridiculous one, decided that they wanted to have a happy hour on Friday nights as part of a promotion, they would be able to do so for a limited number of times. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish, or what we are trying to accomplish with that.
All right. Any council feedback on something like
Has it
that?
been an issue?
I meant to add that we have never had anybody try to abuse this. It was as we were analyzing our alcohol code, we recognized the gap.
But then the onus would be on the caterer and not on the establishment. Why would an establishment that sells pets take it upon themselves to think, oh, I'll do happy hour every Friday night? I mean, should the onus be on the caterer, or should it be on the person who has the business license to understand you can't do this?
Let me use a less silly example.
Okay.
Perhaps an alcohol, a craft beer and wine market decided that Friday nights they also want to introduce distilled spirits.
Okay. Got it. Close the loophole, I guess.
So I guess the question is number, how many, and 5 was actually the one I was kind of just thinking about. So I don't know, somewhere between
Fine.
2 and 10. I don't know.
5 seems good, or none. I mean,
Because anyone can get 2 special event permits. This is anything that doesn't go to that extreme, I'm assuming, right?
That's entirely correct. So anybody, all of you included, could get two special event permits per year at your homes or at your place of business. This would be events that just don't rise to that special event level, and it left an opening.
And this is going to be on the 17th, correct?
This will be on the 17th.
So if council's okay with putting a limit, we might not have to tell you exactly how many, but is 5 a good number just to throw in there?
well, is it
6, 7, right?
problematic to get a special event permit so that there's parity out there? I mean, I'm not trying to be onerous, but what if you're trying to discourage it from being excessive? Isn't it just a matter of paperwork and have tracking?
I would say the special event permit is more onerous. It is a process, and perhaps we could create a lesser process should it be only related to alcohol.
So this one has a current process. It's literally just location, time, day, what type of alcohol will be served, and who's serving it. You don't have to go to the lengths of having the map of the facility, where things will be, and going through all that process with all the different departments.
Correct, but it'll limit it to 2.
Or if you included it.
We will be limited to 2 events if we required. Give me a second to reacquaint my brain around this. If you simply for an alcohol beverage caterer, the limit for this is for non-special events, so it doesn't meet the threshold. This would be events anywhere in the city, including private residences, where you'd be able to do an alcohol beverage catering event. And what we're seeking to do is seeing if the council wants to limit it. The concern is that right now there are no limits. There's no limits as to where they can go, and there's no limits to the number that they can go to. If you wanted to require special event permits for each of these, they would be limited to 2. Am I missing anything, Bernadette? Can you think of anything I'm missing?
So to Councilman Jacobus's point, 6 is one every other month, I guess. And I mean, like I said, we don't have a full council tonight. So obviously I just want to get somewhere to where we can have a discussion on the 17th. So as long as council's okay with a limit,
Yeah.
throw in a reasonable number and we can kind of debate on the 17th. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And just one other reason why I would attempt to dissuade the council from marrying it to a special event permit is because it's not a special event, and it would potentially water down what a special event truly is.
Yeah, I understand.
May I ask if those in attendance are okay with the exclusion suggested?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, Bernadette. The 2 exclusions we were recommending were the outdoor auditoriums and the special event facilities, just by the nature of what they are. Both of those require council-approved use permits.
Right.
So nothing could spring up without your knowledge. And you could turn around and condition and limit those should you want to as well.
I'd want those excluded for
Yeah.
sure.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. So similar to what we just discussed, the city receives numerous requests from the city receives numerous requests from nonprofits, including charitable organizations, to conduct these types of smaller events that include alcohol. After significant research and practice, staff cannot identify any reason to preclude nonprofits from being able to serve at these smaller catered events. The state of Georgia requires nonprofits to obtain a city permit before they'll issue a state permit for this kind of event, and they do need a state permit for that to be able to do it. If council would like to allow nonprofits to obtain permits for small catered events, again, these means alcohol catered, staff is recommending limiting them in a similar manner to the alcohol beverage caterers by location and exclusion. So put in plain language, right now, Bernadette, just make sure I'm saying it right if you would. Right now, if a nonprofit wanted to serve alcohol, the only way they'd be able to currently do that is by acquiring a special event permit. And that's a limitation of 2, and it is not a special event. It is only an event where alcohol is being served, and those 2 should be bifurcated. The real requirement is what the state requires, and that's the permit, the 1-day permit. And for them to grant that, they need the city to grant that same or similar permit. And this is all around the distribution of alcohol, because a nonprofit gets it donated generally at the wholesale level, and the state wants to be able to regulate that. So similar to the last one, we're looking for similar regulations associated with nonprofits.
If we did what we did with the last one, we wouldn't see more than 6. A nonprofit doing more than that at any one location. It makes
If,
it easy.
if
Keep-
more than once a year. I
If-
mean,
yeah. But it just
Can you
keeps
pop your
everything similar.
thing back up?
It's limited on is it limited on location, not the nonprofit, correct, Steve? It's location based.
It is limited by location. So a nonprofit could have an event at a golf course one week.
Okay,
They could have it at the green another week. They could have it at some venue another week.
Okay.
it's just the location, which makes sense. So probably if we just mirror what we did before would make
Yeah.
sense, I guess.
Same exclusions we're recommending.
Sure.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears a little bit. So an incidental service license allows for the limited free service of malt beverages and/or wine to be served to a customer. A customer may not be served more than 16 ounces of wine or 24 ounces of malt beverages in a calendar day. Current holders of alcohol beverage licenses are prohibited from applying for an incidental service license, and only a very small portion of gross receipts can be spent by the establishment for the provision of this free alcohol. The current issue is that our code has a fairly wide field of what a qualified establishment may be. We are proposing reducing that field a bit and placing it within the discretion of the community development director with the advice and assistance from staff and council to ensure that we do not allow incidental service at establishments that are not compatible with such service. That section we obviously had that gap as well. I took that section from Alpharetta because as it stands, an incidental service license could go anywhere. A gas station could apply for an incidental service license, and they could give out free alcohol at a gas station, so long as they're not also selling beer and wine. And I don't think that's what we intended when we introduced the incidental service license. I think it was more associated with what we've seen here at nail salons, at arts and crafts studios and things like that. Currently, I think we only have one incidental license in the city, but it is something that we still continue to offer. It's still something that state continues to allow, and I just think that we should consider regulating it a little bit closer.
All right, so they can't sell food or alcohol, they just give it to customers?
They do, within those very strict limitations. So think about a hair salon, where you might get a glass of wine.
So how's that different than the pet store?
No one's cutting your hair at the pet store. I'm not entirely sure. I think probably it's just more
That was a catered thing.
regular course of action. Going into a salon and getting maybe a glass of wine. Unfortunately, I don't have a personal experience with it any place I go. They're certainly not offering me any
Okay.
alcohol.
But is this something somebody could do on a daily basis?
It is, and they do. So there were a handful of nail salons in the city of Milton that used to give out a glass of wine when you would go for and have a nail service. Currently, like I said, I think I only have one place left in the city that has an incidental license.
But somebody could be a barbershop and decide to give you a beer when you're getting your hair cut.
That's correct, and that's actually one of the common uses of an incidental license. We just don't have one in Milton.
So the change is now you can sell food?
No, the change would be giving the discretion to the community development director, as opposed to just leaving it just wide open. Because what will happen is eventually someone will apply for a limited service license and they'll come before you all. And
Yeah.
you'll be in a position where it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, totally get it. It's just that your proposed didn't carry over both points. So that's fine.
Any other discussion? So is everyone good with allowing the community development director discretion?
Seems like a balance kind of guy.
My last one, the last decision point I'm seeking tonight is currently bring your own beverage or BYOB license is available to all standard on-premise consumption license holders, as well as approved, and that's in quotes, establishments that are not licensed to sell alcohol. Similar to the incidental service license, we're having trouble identifying what is an approved establishment and who approves it. We're proposing that placing the approval within the discretion of the community development director with the advice and assistance from staff and council, similar to the last one.
Well, so this is, so an example for something like this is you go to a restaurant, steak shop, bring your own bottle of wine, you get a corking fee, correct?
Yes.
Or you go to the sip and paint place and you bring a bottle of wine and paint, right?
So, correct. So what we're recommending for the BYOB is reducing it from the standard on-premise consumption, which is pretty wide, and reducing it to restaurants, which is somewhat common, and to the current festival event use permit, which I think we only have one in the city, and that's Matilda's, and they operate under a BYOB model. And we would recommend that those stay that way, and then any additional applications would come through community development with recommendations to you all.
So the only one we have right now is Matilda's?
I have three. We have three. I have one restaurant, I have Matilda's, and I have an art studio
AR
type
workshop.
place, arts and crafts.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, so AR workshop, for example, will they be able to continue, or are we going to have an issue about them not renewing their license?
No, I would assume that would be the kind
Okay.
of thing that the community development director would have approved, but considering we've already approved it,
Got it.
I
Okay.
would assume we would continue to do so. I don't think we have any BYOBs out there that are contrary to what the city would be seeking or something that would be inappropriate.
Where does the art studio fall on what you're showing us? Event?
Neither. Those are the ones that are specifically called out because those are types of places where BYOB is a normal part of the business model. It would be future applications. So a restaurant wouldn't have to seek a BYOB, come to the community development director and say, hey, we would like BYOB. You would assume with a restaurant that while they'd still apply to you all for it, you wouldn't need the input of the community development director. Similar to the festival event use permit. It wouldn't be coming through, but at the same token, a festival event is a use permit. So the council would be getting the first bite at that apple anyway.
Do we have
sorry, I
any-
don't get it. I'm confused.
Do we have any applications in the process right now that if we made changes, they would be affected with this?
I'm not aware of any applications.
So maybe to Councilmember Jacobus's point is it's all up to the community development director, but he has to work within those guidelines of a restaurant or an event place, or is
No.
it more, or does he have complete broad control?
I realize the way
Okay.
way I've structured this is confusing. Restaurants and festival event use permits would already be called out. Anything beyond there would be to the discretion of the community development director. Restaurants, again, those would just be considered as part of the business model, though you would still be here, they would still be before you approving it. And if you determine as a council that BYB is not an appropriate add-on for them, you don't approve it. Festival use is a use permit. So when they come before you for the use permit, you may determine at that point that's not something you'd be interested in, and you can condition it as such. And then again, you would still have the ability to determine should they apply later if you did allow it in the use permit. And then finally, all other uses would be under the discretion of the community development director with discussions with staff and the city council. And I would assume it would be structured similar to how we were when the short time we were doing the warrants.
So if we had a restaurant that's 50-50, and so they're serving alcohol, but they've never done BYOB, and then they decide to allow for people to bring in their wine, they have to come back to us for another permit?
They do. Another
Why?
license.
Why?
That's a normal part
Well,
of
yeah, I was
of
gonna
alcohol code.
actually say the same thing. So with our restaurants,
That's just
why
like,
why wouldn't we just allow that at their discretion to include, the license include BYOB? I mean,
to me,
they
that's
have a
just,
right to do it or not to do it. I just don't know why we'd ask them to do another permit.
So nobody under alcohol code, Nobody's vested with any rights. And you generally break those up for the municipality to decide what you want and where you want it. If a municipality has very broad powers when it comes to alcohol.
Okay, so we could allow that, but not necessarily charge.
Well, we could incorporate this into a standard consumption on premise specific to restaurants.
That was kind of my
And
question.
similar to how we, for manufacturing, you incorporate the on-premise consumption and the package sales. So it would be easy enough to do. We just haven't done it in the past.
I'd like,
Go
go
ahead. I was just, I'm not trying to broaden alcohol per se, but I'm trying to make it easier on the, so it's just nice, neat and clean and easier to track.
I can give you an example of where we didn't incorporate, where we did exactly what you're saying. You can also buy one bottle of wine from a restaurant to go, not even cork, just you could buy it from the restaurant. That was a newly passed legislation the last few years. We don't require a separate package sales license to be able to do so. So this would fall under a similar paradigm if that's what the council would like to do.
I think we should do that. I think it just makes it easier to do business with Milton.
I mean,
Make it more
yeah.
difficult.
I'm just trying to think of any way we,
Use-
I mean, yeah, if it's 50/50, I don't see how any council would, yeah, I mean, I'm all about streamlining things and make it easier, so.
And with a restaurant, they'd have even more requirements than a 50/50. They would have
Yeah.
the seating capacity. They'd have to have the 60% seating area.
And in general, they don't want
Things
you
off
bringing
40.
in alcohol. They want to sell you
40%.
the alcohol. It's only going to be on those unique circumstances, so.
I've only seen one restaurant
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
asked for it, and I think they just did it because they had it before.
Is council okay with that?
Can I make one distinction?
Of course.
We have two properties in the city that currently have a festival use permit. One of them has the BYOB and one doesn't. So if you would like this language, the other one would be automatically allowed to apply for that. Everyone else would have to get a new use permit from this council.
So the second one, correct me if I'm wrong,
Oh,
is vestigial. And we have a new use permit in place of that one. But you'd
That's
still,
just the technical
this
standpoint.
probably is not a discussion for this moment. But before we had the festival use permit, they fell under a different use permit. It's not a currently functioning operation, but it is a property that holds that use permit, and it would still allow them to apply for a BYOB. Though the fact is, it is now basically an event facility, right?
Well, that's the clarification. They have the festival use permit. Under today's rules, they would have had the rural agricultural event use permit, which would give them the right to the alcohol.
It's something we need to deal with, but I don't think it's something we need to confuse you with you all tonight.
Okay. Sounds good. Got direction on that? Okay. Next one?
Well, now it gets easy.
Okay.
I hope there's not a quiz, Mr. Krokoff.
I agree.
All I know is I'm ready to be done with alcohol,
Me too.
so.
I'll know this for 3 months, and then I'll have to go back and review it again. So the new structure for the alcohol code, and this is just informational, you need to make no more decisions this evening. So we have streamlined it in a manner that we feel is intuitive and breaks it out in a manner that not only the applicants will be able to traverse, but also staff and council as they look at the alcohol code. So what we've done is we've broken it up into these 13 articles, and it just goes general definitions, licensing and qualifications. Those were the same as they were before. Then Articles 3 through 8 are the actual alcohol licenses, and it's very clear what the licenses are and what the requirements are, including the hours of operation. We then move into the event alcohol beverage permits, which we just discussed. Open container districts, enforcement, reporting requirements, and excise taxes and wholesalers, and that was the same structure as it was before. So it should make it just a bit easier for us all to make our way through the alcohol code.
This is very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, there are a couple of things you're just not going to see anymore, and we could turn around and include them in the future should the council wish to, We just currently don't have any of these uses. And instead of creating the concepts and potentially it being used in a manner that wasn't anticipated, we think it would be best that we have the proposals of what they're going to be and then come before council and see whether it's something that the council would like to see in the city. So growler shops no longer exist. Growlers are packaged malt beverage. Growlers exist, but we don't have growler shops. Private clubs, we don't have any in the city of Milton. And to have one, there are all kinds of requirements. Sports clubs, we don't have any bona fide sports clubs in the city. Should one emerge and they would like an alcohol license, we can discuss what that could look like at the council level. And then there was just a lot of old language that really just didn't make a tremendous amount of sense anymore and potentially added confusion. So those were removed as well.
Good, thank you.
And then finally, we'll be back before you next week. I have done some research and I've met with some members of the Planning Commission regarding the barrel limits. However, I don't have enough information to bring before you now. And they did have concepts as to why they got to the numbers of where they got to. And I'm looking forward to presenting that to you all next week. But other than that, we have hit just about all the major decision points in Chapter 4.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Steve?
Yeah. Well, can we get a copy of all the licenses that you're going to present before next Monday so we have a chance to read through them again for that time?
I'll make sure you have that.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the other decision pieces now are the use permits that Robin is going to present to you.
Mayor, can I read that item? It is consideration of RZ 2203, a text amendment to Chapter 64 as it relates to alcohol. Ms. Robin McDonald.
I thought we were on the same one.
It's Groundhog Day or something.
No.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, I'm going to talk about RZ 22-03, the text amendment to Chapter 64 as it relates to alcohol. So this is the sister chapter to Chapter 4 as far as what the discussion is tonight. So tonight, we are going to first outline our main goal and objectives, which is, first, the only goal tonight is to adopt a comprehensive set of rules and regulations within the zoning ordinance, Chapter 64, for alcohol-related uses that are consistent with the alcohol ordinance that Steve just went through. As far as objectives tonight, I want to review what the Planning Commission recommended regarding alcoholic-related uses. For those uses permitted, how will they be allowed within the zoning ordinance? Which zoning districts? Just review what so far you all have recommended by right, as well as the Planning Commission. And also look at by use permit. And I'm going to be getting into more details. We're going to review the proposed use permits that have come out of the various discussions, both with you all in the previous meetings and with the Planning Commission. And so as I go through this, really another goal or objective tonight is to get your input. Obviously, you've already given some input the last couple of meetings, as Steve mentioned, but there's still some holes to fill in that we're just going to go through step by step just to make sure we get your input, as well as being very specific about the zoning districts and transect zones, and making sure what we believe we heard from you to make sure it's correct. So just in general, the Planning Commission met on this topic on April 27th, May 25th, and with a final recommendation was made on June 22nd, 2022. In general, the following changes were recommended. Section 64.1, which is the definitions in the main part of the zoning ordinance, as well as Crabapple, Deerfield form-based code definitions were made consistent between the three sections. I'm happy to tell you that when we come to the Unified Development Code in the spring or early or late winter, we're going to combine all the definitions into one place, so we don't have to worry about this consistency issue. Secondly, 64-395, it's a section of the code that talks about uses prohibited in all zoning districts. So we added bars and nightclubs just to be very black and white of what's not permitted. C1, C2, and mixed use deleted the phrase all uses licensed and or permitted under Chapter 4. So that was basically a coverall previously used to try to deal with the alcohol-related uses. And then finally, in the rural Milton overlay district, we have a nice handy dandy chart that talks about the different types of uses. And again, there was an asterisk that allowed alcohol for various uses as permitted in Chapter 4, and we have deleted that. So staff also recommends the above items be approved by you all when it comes to that point next week. So this is, before I go on, you to be spying on things. Plenty of them. So this has a lot of information on it, so I wanted you all to have your own personal copy. So this is basically a cheat sheet, but I'm going to go through every use as well as every, talk through every zoning district after we kind of just look at this in general. So the top, on the top line, you see a zoning MIX, which is mixed use C1. So that's traditional zoning that's in the Birmingham corners. There's some other areas of the city that still have that, but not very much. Then as you go to the right, we start with Crabapple form-based code, Transact T4, Crabapple T4 open, Crabapple T5, and then we get into Deerfield, T4, T4 permissive, T4 open, T5, and T6. Okay, so, and then on the left, I have a little representation that R means by right, NP is not permitted, and use, a U for use permit. On the top line is restaurant, and you're like, okay, this just says R on it. Well, that's what is permitted. And it's kind of a baseline for some of our proposed uses that are related to alcohol. So I just wanted that for your reference. For craft beer and or wine market, you all stated that you wanted a use permit. Everything in blue is what the Planning Commission recommended, and they did not want what was equivalent of a craft beer or wine market that was proposed to them, which was, help me with that, Bernadette, but it was what we called it.
We called it a off-premises beer or wine retail store with consumption on premises.
Yeah.
And
So,
they said no, thank you.
And Robin, you might just about to say this, but you said we did say use permit, which I believe you're correct.
correct. So I'm gonna, in the next slides, I'm gonna
Okay.
walk through exactly where do you want that use permit to go for the craft beer or wine market. So the next one is retail packaged malt beverage or wine store. So this is basically a retail use. Again, I did not get what you all preferred, but as far as the Planning Commission, they recommended it to be by right for MIX, C1, not permitted in T4 Crabapple, by right in T4 open, Crabapple T5 by right, not permitted in T4, T4 permissive, or T4 open in Deerfield, and then by right in T5 and T6. And so let me also you're like, okay, well, that doesn't mean much to me, Robin, but along with your the papers that I gave you are some maps that you can look at as we go through item by item or use by use. So don't feel like you don't know what to look at, but you will. Retail packaged distilled spirits store. You all said you wanted to have a use permit. So again, for MIX, you didn't state for the regular zoning districts what you wanted, but for the Planning Commission, it was not permitting an MIX. They recommend a use permit for the Birmingham Crossroads only for C1, not permitting that use in T4 or T4 open, but a use permit in T5. And then as we go to Deerfield, you all also said not permitting in T4 permissive, T4 open, but wanting a use permit in T5 and T6. You all did, but the Planning Commission recommended a use permit for this use just south of Webb Road, adjacent to Highway 9. With the microbrewery and microdistillery, again, you all want, as well as the Planning Commission, wants to use a use permit. So with any kind of manufacturing, a brewery or distillery or micro, whatever you want to call it, as well as a brew pub, there was some research done by the Planning Commission just talking about when you have businesses on septic systems, where we have in Birmingham Crossroads, and there's some areas of Arnold Mill, and again, there's a map included that you can see where we have C1 existing. That it basically burdens, when you have a brewery or manufacturing, it overburdens the septic system in those areas. And therefore, that was their reasoning of not wanting to have a use permit or allowing those manufacturing type uses in the traditional zoning districts. When we go back to microbrewery, microdistillery, you all did not, for the traditional form-based code areas, not permitting in T4, but have a use permit for T4 open, and not permitting Planning Commission, and then both use permit, both of you, PC and you all recommended use permit for T5 and Crabapple. And then you can read along in Deerfield, when you get to T5, you all recommended a use permit, but the Planning Commission again recommended a use permit only south of Webb along Highway 9, although you specifically stated in the last meeting that you wanted it wherever T5 is located. And then the T6 by use permit. Then lastly, brew pub. Again, because this has a component of manufacturing, not having it at MIX or C1, we need to get some input from you all specifically for Crabapple form-based code, which areas you would like to see it by use permit. The Planning Commission stated not in T4. But
Robin, I hate to interrupt you, but I think last meeting we were going to do by right on the brew pubs.
You are correct. Yes. So I'm confused. Yes, it was by right. And you all did by right, but they did use permit. But I do want to go over in a minute exactly which transect zones. And yeah, so you are correct. Okay. So let's go on. To brew pub. You all wanted it to be by right. You just said that. Crabapple form-based code. PC recommend T4 open, T5. And so now I am asking you all, based on next to you, do you want to be consistent with them, or do you want to add some additional transect zones to that?
So Mayor, we'll take notes now in each of the, where the
Okay.
question marks are.
So we're doing brew pub right now,
Yeah.
and council was fine with brew pub being by right, and brew pubs are 50-50, right? right?
correct?
Right.
That's why we were
Yeah,
good
that's,
with it.
yeah,
right.
that's why we're good
Yeah.
with it. So I would like council discussion because if you're a 50-50, I almost think you're almost like a restaurant.
You
at that.
should be a
Yeah,
restaurant. I mean,
so-
a Restaurant.
So you would like it to be in all transect zones that are where restaurants are permitted,
Well, I'm just trying to
which
look and,
is at the
and-
top.
yeah, I'm trying to look and see on this form-based code, where would we not want a restaurant, basically?
So
I
I
mean,
will say that with crabapple, it's a little more limiting when you have T4. When you have a restaurant, you only are allowed up to 30 seats in a T4. So just FYI, when a restaurant wants to operate in T4, they're limited to 30 seats
In crabapple only?
in crabapple only.
But that's up to them. I mean,
That's
it
their
doesn't,
call,
yeah, that
right?
doesn't matter to us, right? They want to do
so
that.
I think what your point is, if we allow a brew pub in T4, they can have unlimited seats. Is that what you're saying? No? Or-
They would be dictated by
Okay,
the zoning of T4. I'm just
Right.
letting you know, FYI, they can only have up to 30 seats.
Okay.
But that's on them.
That's,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your discretion, right?
so Robin, is there anywhere, so mixed use C1, yeah, I guess I don't see anywhere where if you have a restaurant, why we wouldn't want to have a brew pub. I'm just trying to think outside the box here.
The only potential limitation I would recommend to council is the wastewater associated with brew pubs. And some of our MIX and C1 is not on sewer. It's not on sanitary sewer. Some of it would be in areas where we don't have sanitary sewer. I'm still doing whatever research I can regarding the wastewater from distilleries, breweries, brew pubs, but that might be a consideration in where you might locate it.
So we'd have that by the 17th.
You will have everything I can get to you by the 17th.
So I think for Crabapple and Deerfield, I think council's okay with wherever a restaurant can go, a brew pub can go, and anywhere else, either not permitted or by use permit. Would
Yeah.
that be safe?
Well, it depends on the
Yeah.
infrastructure.
The
I mean, you
septic.
can't overburden. So is that by use then, or would,
So it would still be by right. I would just recommend if the information that comes back is that it would be too taxing on a traditional septic system or one that you would be comfortable with, that you keep it limited to the Crabapple and Deerfield areas where they can access the sanitary sewer.
Makes
Mhm.
sense.
it's fine.
That makes sense.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is to allow it by right wherever a restaurant is permitted, except we're going to get more information regarding the C1 and MIX in the unsewered areas. Okay.
correct. All of these are going to be by right.
Okay. What happened? Okay, freaked me out here. Okay, the next item is a retail package malt beverage wine store. You all, as well as the PC, want to allow it by right. It's basically a retail use. The PC said C1 and MIX. So in which zoning districts does the council want to allow this use when it comes to that? Mainly Birmingham Crossroads, but there are a couple other areas. Arnold Mill, we have a small mixed-use development going in by the Chadwick landfill on your map. And the other two C1s on New Providence, one is the Union, which is a restaurant, and it's conditioned to a restaurant. The other C1 is conditioned to that building as it is to a little bit to the west. It's not permitted to be a restaurant or a retail. It's just a building. So if you go west from the Union, it's that light pink. So,
Right now, Robin, they're only considering C1 and MIX.
correct. When you have C2, we have no C2 zoning districts right now. And then when we are going to be looking at the UDC or working on the UDC, we're proposing to eliminate that zoning district, so it becomes a moot point with C2.
But these will be available also in the form-based code, right?
Correct.
that
I'm going
comes
to go
next.
to
Hold on.
those next, yes.
I know, but I'm reading counsel on that one.
Yeah, I know, I was going all the way through.
Okay, I'm
then-
sorry.
Okay. I wasn't.
So
Do you
to
want me to go
clarify,
on
it
to
doesn't-
No,
form-based?
this is fine. So is council okay with, so it's currently by right, planning commission recommended by right. Is that correct, Robin?
Correct.
Okay, I don't see any problem with that. Does council have any issues?
Talking about mix and C,
I'm
and
s-
C1, right?
Correct.
So it'll break up this way kind of over all the slides.
It's hard to see when you don't have that map, but I'll take, yeah. It's only a handful of places. I
For
think.
these, if you break out the two top ones, the crabapple form-based code and the Deerfield form-based code, you'll see this is the one, that's the Birmingham Crossroads, the one with the square.
Mhm.
The next one below it is the Arnold Mill corridor going past the landfill, and truthfully, that parcel would be hard pressed. Well, potentially it could potentially have a package store. And then the last one, which appears to be within that subdivision, is Providence Road near the Union, and those are the three, the two C1s and the O, right, on Providence.
Office institutional,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if that helps.
Do I have an, okay.
Sorry?
Okay, nothing, I was, are we talking about the OI on Providence? I mean, I just want to make
You
sure.
can't
I-
do retail.
You
on
can't
that
do it
one.
Okay, I was gonna make sure I can vote on that, you know? Okay.
Yeah, no, it would just be the two light pink ones. I'm just
Okay.
identifying what those colors are.
Okay, you started, okay. This says council okay with planning commission's recommendation on those two, just those mix and C1?
By right,
Yep,
Okay.
yes.
Great, thank you. For crabapple form-based code, the PC recommended T4 open and T5,
okay.
But
which
But you
they
could do
didn't
it-
want to do T4, but that's an
That,
option for you all.
that was the one I was gonna have a question on.
why not T4?
I think it was just the intensity, I mean, just they wanted to kind of keep that type of use as far as selling alcohol more to the more denser areas of crabapple, so.
But I mean, I guess my point is if you can do a restaurant in T4, which is pretty intense, I think just a beer and wine market might not be as intense. That's just my,
Whatever your
Okay.
preference is. I'm just the communicator, so yeah.
Yeah, I think all of Crabapple and all of Deerfield, it should be by right. There's a restaurant there, it'd be this wine store.
because it's not a liquor store. This is just beer and wine only, right?
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, yeah. I think for crabapple form-based code, I don't have an issue with that being in T4.
Okay.
And then, and council, I mean, y'all start telling me, I mean, and then, where's the Deerfield T4 open? Because I know it's not near, it's like, that's like residential, right?
So let me just point out the T4 permissive is more the area north of Bethany, and it tends to be just for 2-story limit, and it's a little more residential in that area, but again, that's up to you, what you feel like would be appropriate. I just wanted to point that out, that we don't look at that a lot, that T4 permissive, which is kind of the polka dot north of
See,
Bethany Bend.
If you look up at T4 at the upper part of 9, I could see where a wine store could go there.
Yeah, I wish I could see what it was, like in that T4 permissive, can you tell me what we got like there now so I can start to.
Actually,
some
so
stuff?
we have a assisted living facility on the east side. There's actually some grandfathered industrial uses on the east side as you go up
Mhm.
toward Lake Laurel. And then we have RISPA and
Oh,
a
yeah.
retail furniture store.
And a restaurant.
And actually, we have an alcohol package store right
Okay.
at the port.
Well, then to go to
You're
Councilman
good.
Jacobus's point, I think that would be fine too.
Okay, so by right everywhere in Deerfield. T4, T4 permissive, T4 open, T5, and T6.
Where's T4 open? I just want to make there's not a lot of T4. Oh no, T4 open. I see the.
Yeah, there's not a
okay.
lot of T4 open left.
Okay. All right.
Great.
But not T4, right? Because that's just residential. Just
Well, you're
T4.
saying, T4 would be,
Because I only see just a little smidgen of that.
there's not much of T4 that's even
But
existing.
that's just like residential, right?
It's mixed use still.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right.
It
that
can
works.
be. It's where really not much T4 at all. It's mostly T4 open. So,
I think that T4 is built,
I'm just,
right? Isn't that
I'm sorry?
Isn't that T4 built already? I think that's built
probably,
out.
yeah. That's why I'm saying there's not much left at all.
okay. I didn't really see any.
So
Okay.
T4,
Okay.
it's residential up off of off of Cogburn. And there really isn't any other T4. So it's really kind of a moot point.
No, I just want to make sure we
Okay.
don't convert, I just want to make sure we don't convert like a residential area and all of a sudden they can do wine and beer, but,
Can't say never,
Okay.
never, but I mean, it's a,
all right. We're good for tonight. I think
We're
we're
good for tonight.
Yeah.
with
We all good?
T4. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, craft malt beverage and or wine market, you recommended with a use permit. So if we go to Planning Commission, again, as I said, does not want this type of use at all. And what I need to find out from you all is if you, first of all, want it allowed in C1 and MIX, and then we'll get into the form-based code. So
Craft beer.
And their reasoning is,
they just did not want to have that less than 50-50 type of use, I believe. They just really wanted just 50-50.
Actually, a 60/40.
But is
Oh,
this,
60-40, I'm sorry.
This is a 60/40 use.
That's why I think.
give us an
Right.
example of,
So you have two.
yeah,
It would be the New York Butcher Shop
right?
and Savvy Provisions. They have to, correct me if I'm wrong, 60% of their revenues have to come from other than on-premise consumption.
With a combination of off-premise package sales along
And
with food
grocery,
and meals and groceries.
right.
This is where we wanted a use permit from our prior discussions.
So we did, and this was where the council landed. And there is a little history there with the planning commission, because there was some iterations of what this could look like. And Robin and Bernadette were trying to condense some of the various uses when it came to retail and on-site, on-premise consumption. So I know you all went around a little bit on this, but at one point, if I remember correctly, I think what the planning commission's biggest concern was they didn't want a package store where people came and drank. So we don't have that. The craft beer and wine markets aren't that, but they were originally considering something called a
We had it in two different iterations. We had the general retail with consumption on premises, and then we had the package store with consumption on premises to allow for either model.
And we've amended ours a bit, which matches the uses that we currently have in place. Both of our craft beer and or wine markets both have a good mix of what you'd expect between groceries and wine and craft beer. So I believe that generally we've accomplished, or at least we've gotten away from what the planning commission's concern was about having a package store with just a package store with on-premise consumption. So when I brought this back to you to the council a few weeks ago, we talked about craft beer and wine markets and going forward requiring a use permit.
Okay.
And basically, it is a package store with groceries and prepared foods and meals, which allows limited on-premise consumption.
Explain to me the 60/40 again, which is 60, which is 40?
40% can be consumption on premises of alcohol. The other 60 can be made up of a combination of off-premise sales of packaged beers and wines, groceries, or prepared food and meals.
And the 60/40,
forgive me, is dollars. It's revenue, total revenues, 60% of other than on-premise, and then 40% for on-premise consumption.
We also have that floor plan regulation to make sure that when you walk in, it does not appear to be just a bar.
And so I think, so we did use permit. I remember we had this discussion. So I'm just going to, go from the hip here. So we'll do Crabapple, T4, T4 open, and T5 as use permit. And then Deerfield, I guess the 6, 5, and what, T4 open, I guess, and permissive. We need some help on that.
Mayor, can you
You'd want
repeat that?
T4, T4 open. Yeah, because if you go to T4 open,
Mayor, can you repeat that first part, please?
So I'm just gauging council here based on our previous discussions. There'd be use permit for T4 in the Crabapple, T4 open in Crabapple, and T5.
all
Okay.
three of them.
Yep. That's use permit. And then Councilman Jacobus is working on the relatively same on Deerfield.
Yeah, I don't see the need for the use permit in T4. But there is
You mean just it's not permitted?
right.
Okay. And that's kind of where I was going with the previous one, was I was open to the other two, but the T4, I really wasn't sure where that T4 was.
I'm trying to think, you said there's other development there. I'm trying to think what else is there.
I believe it's,
Isn't that where the school is?
it's across the street from the school. And it's, I can't remember the name of the subdivision right there. I believe that encompasses the T4, Right opposite the
On
school.
Cockburn,
right on Cockburn.
just north of the daycare center.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just all a neighborhood, but there's no stores in there.
No,
No,
while
there's-
it's T4, it didn't come in as a mixed-use T4. It's just residential.
Oh, okay.
There's
So
no more room to build out in
So,
there.
No need.
so no on the T4, yes on the other ones.
No on T4?
Yep. And so based on our previous discussion, I think on the wine and beer market, we said yes to T4, but let's
No, it
scrap,
should be
let's
no.
let's
On the
scrap
retail
that.
store.
Yeah.
So you want to be
Under-
consistent with
Under
this.
Crabapple?
T4.
Yeah.
The NP.
The Deerfield T4 not permitted for craft beer wine markets or retail package.
Okay, so then the rest of them, T4 permissive, T4 open, T5, and T6
Yep.
with the use permit.
Correct.
And what was the feedback for MIX and C1?
Yeah, we'll go back to, we skipped the C1 and MIX.
I'm assuming we'll do use permit since we're
Okay.
doing it for the other ones. That's more.
Okay,
Oh, should-
okay. So,
Mayor, did you say T4 and Crabapple
Yes.
was use permit?
Yep. Use permit. T4 and Crabapple.
Sorry about that. Got it.
okay, so this is our first use permit. So if you look at your screen or the craft beer and wine market, I'll make sure the required districts are consistent, what is approved or what you are proposing. The standards would be no outdoor amplified music shall be allowed. No signage shall face residential uses. A lot of that's because we have uses right next to residential and form-based code. Delivery shall occur between 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m., which is what our garbage is allowed to happen. Days and hours of operation will be pursuant to Chapter 4. Primary purpose is the sale of craft beers and/or wine for consumption off premises in conjunction with the sale of prepared food and/or groceries. Sale of craft beers and wines will be for consumption on premises and/or by the package. Any question about that? If Bernadette, if you want to talk about the difference we talked about this afternoon, it's kind of an add-on versus
So
the alcohol.
as city manager mentioned earlier, there are 3 uses within these types of establishments. So they would first have their by right license for a package store, and then they would add on this use permit to be authorized to have the license for the consumption piece.
And then just stating, no sales of distilled spirits for consumption on or off premises shall be allowed. And then G, H, and I are reflective of what is in Chapter 4 regarding various different items, not selling or offering to sell CBD, vape products, or any other substance defined in Section 32.114. And they're not allowed to have any games of chance, including but not limited to OCGA 50-27-3. And then no coin-operated or amusement machines are prohibited. And then they shall not permit on such person's premises any slot machines of any kind or character, or any coin-operated machines, or any machine operated for amusement purposes. And so all the use permits are going to go through, they're going to have those last three requirements as well. So is there anything that speaks up to you or questions?
I don't see anything. Council, anything?
Okay. Okay, we're at the microbrewery and microdistillery. We were directed by you all and recommended by PC to allow this use by use permit. Steve will have additional information next week, but the PC recommended a maximum of 3,000 barrels per year to be manufactured. So this is making the assumption as we get more information. I'm not really dealing with the C1 or MIX areas of unsewered, but now we're just looking at crabapple form-based code. PC recommended T5. You all from the previous meeting stated T4 open and T5 with the use permit. Deerfield, Planning Commission recommended T5 south of Webb Road adjacent to Highway 9 and T6. You all recommended T5 and T6 everywhere. And then both PC and council wants to delete brewery and distillery, just as FYI. Okay.
Council have any discussion on that?
No.
Okay.
Again, this is the use permit, required districts, and then very similar, no outdoor amplified music, no signage, shall face residential uses, deliveries, hours of operation will reflect Chapter 4. And then this will be still up for discussion next week if you all want to put a maximum number of barrels of manufacturing each year. And then the rest of the shall not sell or offer to sell, the three other items. Okay. So any other input on that?
Yeah. Anything? Nope.
Okay, the retail packaged distilled spirit store, a liquor package store, AKA. Also allow with a use permit. Both you and the Planning Commission wanted that. The Planning Commission recommended C1, but only in the Birmingham Crossroads Overlay District with a use permit. Let me just give you a little bit of background of what exists now in that area. So when we adopted Fulton County zoning ordinance in 2006, package stores, liquor package stores were allowed in C1. And then in 2013, we did kind of a comprehensive look at the different uses in the city. And mayor and city council voted not to be in, it was allowed in C1. And then in 2013, it changed to C2. So the only liquor store that is in Birmingham came about before that 2013. So I just wanted to clarify that with you all. So C2 does not exist in the city at this time. We'll be deleting the zoning district with the adoption of the UDC. And in which zoning district does council want this use in with the use permit? So I guess, do you agree or want any changes with the traditional zoning districts?
See here. So Crabapple, we have T5 and then we'll see
Can we,
T4 open.
can we keep with the traditional
What?
ones, the C1, C2?
Oh, yeah.
The
okay.
Birmingham
Yeah,
or the
sorry.
Arnold Mill corridor?
Anybody have any?
No, I'm good with those.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Councilperson Jacobus, what did you say?
I was good with the C1 and C2.
In the mix.
Anywhere?
No, so whatever we said, so we say that again. So we're okay with the use permit.
Right?
In
For-
Birmingham Crossroads.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not in MIX or anywhere else in C1, just Birmingham Crossroads, right?
Correct.
Okay, now we can go on to the
That, yeah.
form-based code. T5 was Planning Commission. You all also stated T5 in
Okay.
your previous meetings for Crabapple. Are you still good with that, or do you want to expand it, or?
This is purely liquor store, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably fine. Looking.
So I also want to state that, well, I'll get that when we get to the use permit, sorry.
I think that's appropriate for Crabapple T5.
Okay. For Deerfield form-based code, the PC stated T5 and T6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you all were also in favor of the T5 and T6.
But in Deerfield, I think it should be allowed in T4 permissive.
Yeah, by a use permit, right?
Right.
Because my only question is, did you say there was already one in there up in the T4?
So there is
permissive?
already a liquor package store in T4 permissive at the county line on the south side, on the right side as you go toward Forsyth County.
It's right across from the entrance to the golf course.
Yeah. As long as it has a use permit, I'm not.
No, I know, it's just grandfathered in.
Yeah. But going forward, as long as we have that use permit in place to protect it,
So you're
I think
good
that's
with
fine.
T4 permissive? Okay.
To be you. So I'm going to change that.
I hope someone's taking notes.
I got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Got three of us.
Or open.
And just
In
to clarify,
Deerfield.
we don't have the issue with the south of Webb Road item, right? We're just saying all
All
of
of it.
T5.
But there's also T4 open.
That's what I'm looking at. I'd probably say no, but I don't know what's there, so.
It's T4 open. Hey, it's all residential.
So that's a no.
It's not needed.
Do they want to follow?
There's actually not a lot of T4 open left.
Yeah.
There's only a couple lots on Webb Road,
Not at all.
across
My
the street
red
from
is
the city
official.
open space, on the south side of Webb, west of 9. And then, that's it for the T4 open.
So yeah, T4 permissive, T5 and T6.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in the use permit, I'm going to go to that right now. For the use permit is.
We go back to that last thing we had.
Sure.
Yeah, that quarter mile. Was it?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's part of the use permit, but staff and PC recommended that there not be the distance between two package stores has to be more than a quarter mile. And I think more recently, Community Development Director recommended denial of a warrant for one at Morris and Webb. It was pretty close to some other ones. And I think you all supported that determination. So it would just help to kind of call out the requests. I get a lot of requests for liquor package stores.
So yeah, I would,
So,
I mean, I'm personally okay with that. So,
okay.
I am too.
So keep it.
So that's basically what it says on the next page. Very, a duplicate of all the other ones, just that distance requirement. And I called it out as 2,640 feet. For purpose of this requirement, distances shall be measured by the most direct route of travel on the ground. So just FYI. That's that.
nice.
I'm just missing.
So I believe that that concludes what I was seeking from you all for information. So if you guys have any other general questions or issues.
I actually understand it.
Good.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Sorry, thank you for bearing.
No, it's good.
Actually,
The
that's-
table's
We'll
helpful.
do it all over
Yeah,
very
again
helpful.
next week.
Next. Thanks.
All right. I gotta find my script, everybody. All right. Do we have any public comment real quick, Tammy?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay, so we need to adjourn into executive session for potential litigation, land
Personnel.
acquisition, and/or personnel. All right, do you have a motion for that?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion that we adjourn
Second.
into executive session.
Got a motion from Councilmember Kirkland, a second from Councilmember Verhoff. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. All right,
Jane, you got your keys?
all right, Tammy, we're gonna do a
I
motion
think I
to
put 'em in my-
reconvene.
No, I don't have my keys yet. Where
Who
is-
wants to make a motion to
I don't
reconvene?
have it. I make a motion to reconvene for the purpose of adjourning.
All right,
I second that.
all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we're in a work session, so we don't even have to make a motion to adjourn, so.
Just wanted to make you do extra work.
I got my key, Carol.
Very good.
Good night. Yeah.
Night.
Tomorrow,
Everybody's screens off.
figure out what next Monday.